So everybody, welcome to the IronRoad Way. We've got a special treat for you today. I've got two very unique people here with us today who have two incredible stories. Yusuf Ahmarudeen and Osman Jama. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I am so excited for you guys to have the opportunity to share your stories because they're things that you only read about in books or in paper. And so, Osman, I'm going to ask you to start.
Sure.
And your journey to the United States started in Somalia. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us a little bit about how you ended up here in the States.
So I ended up here in the States because my country's government collapsed through the Civil War.
Right.
And in the vacuum of no centralized government, warlords took over.
Mm-hmm.
And it escalated until the point where my family had to move.
Now, before you go on from that, it's good because a lot of people here in America that listen to this message will be able to relate with the movie Black Hawk Down.
I was actually going to go use that.
Okay, go for it. Let's hear it.
So Black Hawk Down happened. Bill Clinton riled the UN, and they launched Operation Restore Hope, which was led by William F. Garrison. And he's a believer. I found out his story, his background. He's a believer.
Believer in Christ.
Christ.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he led that operation that tried to bring hope back to Somalia.
Mm-hmm.
In order to do that, warlords used food as a weapon.
So William Garrison was leading was it the UN?
Yep.
Okay.
And
And Clinton's the one that got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So the movie is based on Army Rangers that were called to rescue them. In fact, I've met two of them. One's a country singer, and another one leads a church down south.
Two of the Rangers that came in?
Yep.
Wow. How in the world did you meet them?
So I was part of Campers Crusade, and they had a film called Bulletproof Faith. And so they took these gentlemen back to Somalia and had them reenact or relive and retell the story of what happened.
Wow.
And so I got to, unfortunately, I met them after they went. If I would have met them before, I would have been able to go with. So.
And this would have been, not when you met them.
So this when they went back or when it happened?
When it happened.
When it happened, it was 1991, and it escalated until 1994 and 95.
Okay, so keep going. This story is incredible.
So I was born 2 minutes behind my twin brother, whose name is Muhammad. As custom for Muslim families, they name the firstborn Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
I was named after my grandfather, who died the same day I was born. And so after that, my mom got a little superstitious. She never named a child after living relatives after that.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And then so we lived fairly peacefully from 88 to 82, 83.
So in those, you mean 88 to
1988 is when I was born.
Okay, yeah.
And so for 5 years we lived kind of peaceful, and then the government collapsed. Due to my family being a little bit more wealthy, we were kind of targeted. Mm-hmm. We had houses right on the ocean front, and the warlords needed safer ways to transport goods through boats, and so they evicted everyone in my household. And by eviction, the way my parents described it was when we were moving, we heard fireworks going off, but in reality, it was Somalis killing other Somalis if they didn't move.
So do you have any recollection of this?
I am very fortunate that I saw a child therapist when I was a kid, so no. I have scars, and then I'll show you, or I'll tell you one. So we packed everything we had in a boat. We had two options, to go up to Yemen or Oman, but doing that required going through the Black Sea, and a lot of Somalis died from open water exposure because they didn't build boats to travel in.
Right.
So we went down the coast of Somalia to Nairobi, Kenya. And on the way there, our boat flipped over. My dad grabbed my mom, who had my baby brother. I had two older sisters that grabbed me and my younger sister. And so that left my twin brother out. He drowned that day.
Oh.
And then we got to the border.
Heartbreaking.
We got to the border patrol. When we got to Kenya, the border patrolman, I was still so emotionally hysterical. He took a cigarette and burned it in my arm to get me to stop crying.
And you're 5 years old at that point.
It didn't work. Not at all.
I think that probably made it a little bit worse.
Yep. And so
Ugh.
we stayed at the refugee camp for 3 months, and then we went to Egypt for 3 months and stayed with my dad's friend. And then we went to Paris for 6 months.
Now, you went right by that. Hold on a second. You went to Egypt for 3 months, and you said saved your dad's friend or stayed with him?
Stayed with my dad's
Stayed
friend.
with him. Okay. Okay.
And then we went to Paris for 6 months and lived with my aunt while we were working on our refugee visa to come to the United States.
Okay. So the goal this whole time was to get here.
Right. So I was 5 when I left, and I came to U.S. when I was 6.
Okay.
And so we started in Atlanta, Georgia. Somalis were sent to 5 sanctuary cities in a way: Atlanta, Georgia, Columbus, Ohio, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. And so that's the big hubs. So we got sent to Atlanta, Georgia. We stayed there for a year. Then we moved to Tennessee and Nashville. And then we finally made it to Mecca for Somalis, Minneapolis.
Yeah.
We were there until elementary or about middle school. A kid got shot by a stray bullet in our elementary school, and parents didn't want us to grow up in a huge suburban city. So we moved to Mankato, Minnesota. That move then prompted me meeting my best friend and the first real Christian that I knew, because for me, Christianity was my viewpoint as a Muslim was they were fake in some sense. They said what they believed they were holy, but the lifestyle that they lived
didn't match
up at all.
And that's a lot of the perspective, I think, of many people that live outside the United States, and they look at Hollywood, they look at the way we live, and they hear this is a Christian nation, and they're like, come on.
No.
This is not. Well, I don't want anything to do with that.
Nope.
And so at this point, okay, you're in Minnesota, and you're how old?
I am. So we got there when I was 9. Moved to Mankato when I was about 14.
Okay, so you're 14 years old.
Yep.
And you said, and you guys were a Muslim family, right?
Yep.
And
my dad and my mom donated a lot for the mosque. They were pretty active. My dad was the president of the Somali organization for my hometown, and then my sister recently ran for city council.
Did she really?
She lost.
Did she win?
She lost.
She lost. That's good. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this. He just said it's good his sister lost, Yusuf.
Yeah.
So Osman, at that time, was the United States, did the United States and other countries welcome Somalian refugees? So it was easier to come in here? Because obviously now, with the current temperament, you can't get in here. They're kicking you out.
Right.
You being anybody that is here illegally or...
So as an immigrant, it took from when I was 5 years old to 6 years old for us to get here. I am pro our immigration policy. As a Somali refugee, I recognize that Somalis are in some sense in a targeted group, but it's because 20 years they still haven't finished a civil war, and it's a weird. It's from a person from my culture. I am firm with background checks just to be safe.
Yeah.
And
so here you are, Somalian refugee, and you're like, hey, hold on, there are people that want to get in here that we don't want here. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And a person that has no ill intent and no harm wouldn't care if they're being background checked.
Yeah,
and waiting 3 months is nothing compared to waiting a year.
Yes.
And so...
No, that's great. That's great. So you're in Minnesota. You're 14 years old, and take us from there. So your whole family's there, obviously, minus your brother, twin brother, Muhammad, that you lost, which I can't even imagine, what that had to be like. I can't even imagine. But you guys have made your way to Minnesota. You're 14, so you're integrating into a normal high school life at that point?
Yeah, and so... I was fortunate enough that sports is something that doesn't matter where you're from around the world, what language you speak, but it's an equalizer. Yeah. And so for me,
dude, tell me you played football.
I did. I tried.
Hey Yusuf, what's he look like? What's he look like to you? Football or basketball?
He knows. I ran.
He told me already.
He did? Yeah. What? You tell me, Yusuf. What was he?
He ran like track and field.
What?
And cross country.
Cross country? Osman.
Did you not see you've seen the photos?
No, I haven't seen the photos. I'm looking at him.
Yeah.
When you see him, Yusuf, what do you think of?
Football.
Offensive lineman.
Hey, this is a soccer guy from Nigeria telling us you're an offensive lineman.
That's an offensive line.
Go ahead, you.
No, but he told me yesterday, so that's how I knew.
Okay.
But you won't believe though how.
That was an offensive line.
I've never heard Yusuf say something offensive since I've known him.
I mean, that's the only position I know in football. So
Offensive line.
I'm gonna give you a context.
I look at him and I think linebacker. Let me see this picture.
Do you know how it goes? Conference, section, state.
Yeah.
So this is a section meet to go to state.
Okay. This
Context.
Got it.
So this is first and seconds behind.
Come on, Osman. That is not.
I am.
That is not.
I have.
Hey,
I have footage. I have newspapers.
that's not Osman.
Yeah, that is.
That looks more like Donnie Osmond than it does you.
Yeah.
Oh my, that's amazing.
It's really depressing.
No, but look at you and the next guy in line. Look at that. Did you see that, Yusuf?
I know.
That's incredible.
My past self is more impressive.
What's more impressive?
My past self. Yeah.
Oh, no,
I
that's
was
not true at all.
Super skinny.
That's amazing.
I was like him.
Yeah, you're built like Yusuf, who was not an offensive lineman. We're going to get to hear that story in a little bit. So you're going to East High School?
Mankato East, yeah.
Mankato East.
That was a
I've got to
beautiful
hear
day.
about that.
That
I
was
got
a
to hear
beautiful
about
day.
that. So 14 years old, you're at Mojito East. You're running cross country. That was the equalizer.
For my college food.
These guys are sharing pics.
It's alive.
What's alive?
The cafeteria food, it was advertised as fresh, real,
Oh, yeah.
or fresh, green, real, and alive.
That's not good. Hey, thanks, Osman. That's a bad visual.
Yeah.
They're serving
I
live.
kind of want you to guess what my best mile was.
I think I could do that.
Guess.
Yeah, looking at that body, I bet you I can. I bet you I can get. That's a great. I'm glad you asked me that. I bet you I can get within 10 seconds.
Okay.
What year was it? Yeah, I will.
2007.
2007. I'll know what it is. Give me just a second.
You're going to Google it.
What was our bet again?
Google. You're going to Google it?
Yusuf, what do you think? His best mile.
He knows.
I know.
You know it?
I told him.
I'm
We're
going to tell
talking
you.
about it.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what it is. You ready
Okay.
for this? You ready to
Sure.
pay up? What are we going to bet? Lunch?
You're going to be paying.
Do you want to bet lunch or not? All I need is a yes or no. You
Sure.
both can get in on
Sure.
this. You want to get in on it?
I'm going to pick like the precinct. Go all out.
Yeah, I'll take you to dinner. You, your fiance,
Yeah.
you,
Go.
your best mile. What year? 2007.
Mm-hmm.
What year in high school were you?
Senior.
Senior. You ready for this, Yusuf? You want to ask me what my best mile was as a senior in high school? And I didn't even run track, but we had to do it for basketball.
450.
450. See, he doesn't even know this, but he just gave me a clue. You like how I slid that in there, you? No, 520. But I never trained. I just went out and ran.
It's pretty good.
I was going to guess 410.
That's dead on.
What?
No, seriously. Did you tell him?
Did you tell me you?
No, I didn't.
He didn't tell me.
Say what I hate.
410.
Say
Hey,
what I hate.
hey, everybody here.
Say what I hate.
Well, I didn't.
No.
He didn't tell me.
No.
He didn't tell me.
No.
I told you. Osmond.
No.
You're talking to Chili
You
Willy.
had to know
I
that.
swear.
Promise
Yusuf,
you.
We shared secrets. What are you doing?
Osmond, I promise you he did not tell me.
He told you.
He doesn't believe it.
Well, I swear.
We tell him, Yusuf.
That's what Somalis say.
Voila.
Yeah. It's,
I promise
yeah.
you
Okay, fair
that he did not tell me, and I just nailed it. 410. So guess what?
Pretty good.
I love the precinct.
It's gonna be expensive.
Okay, so
Expensive
we're.
this place is? I picked it just because
I'll take you. So we got Mahota. How do I pronounce it?
My name?
No.
Mankato.
Yeah, Mercado East.
Do you know the history of Mankato?
No.
So my hometown has a horrible.
I think his IQ is probably somewhere around the same level as his mile. He's probably got a 410 IQ too. He's going to tell me the history of Mercado. I know he's memorized Mankato. See, he's memorized the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy's brighter than bright. So anyhow, go ahead.
So-
What's the history of Mankato?
So okay, there's a pop culture fun fact. and historical fun fact.
Okay, let's hear it.
Cultural or the pop culture. Have you ever seen Little House on the Prairie?
Dude, Laura, hello.
What
I grew up with Little House on the Prairie.
You did.
Have you ever seen it, Yusuf?
No.
Wait till we tell Yusuf.
Yeah.
Yusuf's from Nigeria. Wait till we tell his Dolly Parton story. Dolly, I hope you're listening. Okay. Yes, I've seen it.
So if you've seen it, where did they vacation? They lived in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. They vacationed in Mankato. They went to my hometown to vacation.
Really? Never knew that. Wow.
Well, we tell everybody.
So which part of which part is that?
So it's where the Mississippi and
No,
Minnesota
you
River-
said there were two. A pop.
Oh, and then the second one is the Trail of Tears ends in my hometown. They hung and threw 14,000 Native Americans into the river.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a sad one.
That's
The
and you know
campus
what's
used-
even more sad that you said that, and I didn't know what the Trail of Tears was.
Yeah,
you know what's
you
even
did. You knew what it is.
no, I didn't.
Really?
I really didn't.
Oh.
And you know what's
No,
even
that's so
more
sad.
sad than that?
No.
Probably
A lot of people don't.
90. I'm going to say 90+% of Americans don't know
That's
that.
so sad.
It is really
So
sad.
they
Thank
mar-
you for sharing that.
They marched them from Mississippi, Louisiana. They marched them all the way up after Louisiana Purchase, and they hung them. which is really
Unbelievable.
sad. There's a
12,000?
14,000.
14,000.
The campus, Mankato State University, used to be. It's currently their mascot is the Mavericks, which is a bull, but they used to be the Mankato Indians until they changed it.
Yeah, I
They
guess
realized
that's a place
we
where.
can't do that.
Yeah, I mean when they
They wanted to honor them. It was a noble thought, but horrible execution.
Yeah. And the memory of sometimes those
of-
horrible things we have to remember. We can't forget them.
Yep.
We got to learn them and then not forget them so they're not repeated. All right, take me to Mankato East. You're 14 years old. Tell me
Yep.
what happens for Osman.
So I went from going to the west side of town to the east side, and that led to me meeting my best friend Adam. He's a pastor's son.
What made you move?
We
Just family relocating?
family relocating to the other side of town. And there's more Somalis on the east side than there were on the west side. West
And
side
so-
was more heavy white culture. That's why I sound white, which is okay.
What does a Somalian sound like?
I don't know how to
Because I know what a Nigerian sounds like. Can you do a Somalian accent?
No.
You can't do it?
I can't.
All right, good try.
I tried.
Can you, Yusuf? No.
No.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's just it's
So
weird.
you went to go be around more Somalians.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Which makes
But-
great sense.
But yet again, I was in AP classes and not a lot of advanced placement
Yeah,
classes.
there's a shocker
But there's
here.
not a lot of Somalis in that demographic groups, and that's where I met my best friend.
So you meet your best friend. You said he was the pastor's son.
So he's a strong Christian, and I have, at that point, have never met someone that could articulate their faith and defend it well. We kind of left religion on the table.
Muslim or
Muslim
Christian?
versus Christian, yeah.
No.
So I've never met a Christian
Okay.
that could be passionate to you and to respond with a well knowledge of their scripture to
Got it.
kind of combat.
You've met plenty of Muslims that could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
that
and-
was the expectation, right?
And right, and then the sad. So for my ignorant part, and I was a very aggressive Muslim, was I used what I was taught was about the Christian faith, and tried to argue it to him that this is what you believe, and he's like, no, we don't. Like, and he's like, where are you getting that reference? Because I can give you the references
Yeah.
of what we actually believe.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that kind of led us to kind of be at peace because I couldn't.
You respected him.
Right, and he brought very good accusations against Islam that I couldn't defend without having to admit some faults in my own. Whenever I would bring up, okay, so your Christian faith has the sin of the Crusades. You did that. That was evil. Are you going to admit it? And he would respond with, actually, the first 3 were response to something. The other 4 were campaigns for money. Like he's admitting the sins of the 4, but he says, what were the first 3 initiating reasons for the Crusades? Arab conquest of Israel. So he's like, it was a response to violence taking over of Israel, and the Christians responded with, we have to go defense.
Yeah.
So, he's
So
like,
you've got 2.
Are you not expressing? He's like, why are you not? And I would respond with, Islam doesn't spread by the sword. It's spread by peace. I'm like,
Yeah.
But he's like, how do you peacefully take over 5 of the largest nations in the world at the time?
So
I had to look that up to see if he was accurate or spilling.
So let me take you
lies.
back there for a minute. So you're talking about in 2007, you're having this conversation. What was your best friend's name? Or is
Adam.
Adam. So you and Adam are obviously 2 really bright kids. You're having this conversation. You are you said aggressive Muslim. What you meant was you were very convicted and you were going to go.
Oh no, when I meant by aggressive, I wasn't respectful as he was to me.
Yeah, you knew you were right.
So it's weird. My faith response was anger. Like I
like,
took
hey,
it as
get it right.
Right.
Yeah.
So whenever anything was said about Islam, I took it as a personal attack on me.
Makes sense.
It's not an attack on my doctrine. It's not so it's like me. It's like someone arguing. Like for instance, to put it, if it's like arguing to a Jew the Holocaust didn't happen, that would make them very angry and very hurt.
Yeah.
That their history is being demeaned or to be belittled. So when anything was attacked on, I was immediate. My first response.
So
was
you
anger.
guys, both bright guys, going back and forth, both convicted about your.
But
your
he was
faith.
peaceful at his side.
Yeah.
So for him, it was that was the I think the saving grace for him was he never responded hurtfully back to me. I was always the one that initiated the hurtful comments. And
I got you.
So
how long did you guys know each other before you started having conversations like this?
Oh, not long.
You went right at it.
I was an instigator. Yeah.
So you wanted to go. You're like, hey, listen, I'm going to go help this Christian guy figure out what's right. Did you want to convert him?
So yeah, right. So this to give you context. When I came back, what launched this is I went to Hajj, and so when I memorized the Quran as a reward, me and 3 other students got sent to Mecca. Muhammad and Abdullah are both imams now. Great friends. We still argue.
Muhammad and Abdullah were the other 2 that went with you.
Yep, one's an imam in Minneapolis, and one's an imam in London.
Okay.
And so we went,
and that's for people that don't know. It's like being a pastor in a Christian church.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Imam.
And so they came. We all came back, and we were all kind of commissioned to spread Islam. And so for me, it was easy because my best friend, or the person I knew really well, we just immediately started apostatizing. And then he, for a year, invited me to a youth group, but I didn't go.
Yeah, you're like.
And so finally, I thought, well, when
Christian
I came back,
youth group.
When I came back, I now have an audience of people who don't know about Islam, and so I took that personal.
Yeah. So once you did your Hajj, you're coming back, and your mentality is, I'm going to go witness to other people about Islam. You figured out that, hey, I've got a ripe audience here with all these Christians that are running down the wrong path. Yeah. Amazing. So you started going.
Yep. Every other week, I would avoid. So the youth group had an explode night, which is when the youth explode into the community, and an implode night when you self-implode in through Scripture. But I wouldn't go to those. I would only go to the explode nights.
You didn't want to know about the Bible.
I didn't.
You were just going to witness to them about Islam.
Yep. In my opinion, the Bible was corrupted.
Yeah.
And then
why was the Bible corrupted in your opinion at that point? Because you had memorized the Quran, right, front to back.
Because that's what
Yusuf, is that? So Yusuf is a Muslim, and he's from Nigeria. Totally different. I mean, just like Christianity, you've got lots of different, I'm sure, bents. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah.
Maybe. But do you know other people, Yusuf, in Nigeria that have memorized the Quran? Is that something that's typical?
About 85%.
Really? 85% of Muslims memorize the Quran. That's amazing. I mean, that
without even opening the book, we know what's inside.
Say that again?
Without looking at the book,
Right.
we can recite
Oh,
it.
right.
yeah. You've got it memorized. And when you say memorize it, you mean from front to back.
Yep.
The whole book.
That's amazing. That's, I mean, you talk, and is, I've seen the Quran. Yusuf and I have read the Quran together.
It's over 6,000 words.
Okay, and compare that to the Bible. How many is that?
It's like
There
New
goes to
Test-
410.
It's like the New Testament, memorizing from Matthew to Revelation.
Wow, that's impressive. I memorized James 1 once.
Yeah, but there's one aspect of the Quran is one, it's classic Quran, it's classic Arabic. No one speaks the way that the Quran
So
writes.
explain. Do you understand what he means by that, Yusuf? Because I have no idea what. I mean, I know classic Arabic. I know that
It's kind of like
just
it's kind of like King
about-
James.
It's kind of like a poetry.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Poetic Arabic, which is like reading poet.
Uh-huh.
So which is kind of like different. You think it's Arabic, but it's kind of like different. Like in terms of other people speaking it is way different.
So
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's like poetry more.
So- So then the memorizing aspect of it is kind of like memorizing a 6,000 plus word song. It's more recited as a song than it is
Okay.
as just reading words for words.
Okay.
Um,
So it's almost as a result of that, are people able to take it in and
yeah.
absorb it? It's not like you see people
Well,
singing songs
what
all
do
the
you
time
mean-
and
what do you
really.
mean like
it's not
absorbing?
like it's not like it's not like even like it's not even like a song. It's just like according to God in the Quran, He said we've made this book for you, so you can read it and memorize it. Because it was sent as a blessing.
Mm.
Because we got chapters like Surah Yasin.
Mm-hmm.
If you Surah, which is one of the longest chapter in the Quran, which is like almost how many pages? 55 pages. Like there also you see a lot of people like 70% or 90% of people will know it by heart.
Wow.
Without even opening. So
Wow.
It's just a it's a blessing.
Yeah. So the Quran says
Oh, yeah.
God has blessed you with the ability to open it up and memorize it. I got it. I got it. Wow. That's you can't. No matter what your faith is, you can't do anything but respect that. Because like you were talking about earlier, Osman, when people, so many Christians here in this country, and believe me, I am the chief of sinners. Trust me. But and saved by grace and grace alone. But so many people here in the United States don't ever take the time to even go to church, and they call themselves Christians.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Muslim, most Muslims are pretty devoted. Yeah.
Yep.
And by devoted, I don't mean because it'll be interesting. I want to ask you guys later about some of the people, like Boko Haram, for example, okay? Which I believe those guys were at the heart of what happened in Somalia. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
And they still are.
They still are. 20 years later. Unbelievable. And so it'll be interesting. And so by committed, I don't mean committed in that terrorist way. I mean committed to a religion that what I've learned from Yusuf is, from his perspective, a very peaceful religion. I'm very interested in hearing Osman's take on that as well at some point. But it's just you can't help but respect it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So okay, Osman, back to you. So you come back and you've got a game plan, and you're gonna minister, and you're gonna help these people understand Islam. So how'd that go?
So, to kind of squash the mindset, I had to really wrestle with. So, I went to an implode night, and
What's it called?
Implode.
Implode. Okay.
Imploding yourself, the opposite of a bomb. And you you implode into the Bible, and I went to one because a pastor elegantly put, we're going to be studying Genesis 22, Abraham taking his son to be a burnt offering.
So
And-
one of the outreach nights you're at, because you
Yep.
would go to that. You just wouldn't go to the Bible study.
Nope.
So
And
pastor says, "Hey, we're going to talk about Abraham at the Bible
and I
study."
love Abraham.
You were like, "Oh."
He was he is
So
still,
so
still
people-
one of my favorite people.
So
Right.
easy to love. So
Right.
people that don't know.
In
So
Islam, Abraham is a prophet.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
a really foundational.
same story.
No.
Close.
That is what I found out when I went.
Okay, tell us
so
about
as soon as the pastor said Isaac, I immediately rebuked him.
Well,
told them-
give some people some.
So context in Islamic teaching, Isaac isn't the son that gets attempted to be sacrificed. It was Ishmael, and understanding the genealogy of who Ishmael is. A lot of the times when I talk about what is the purpose and the need for Arabs or for Muslims to know who Jesus is, I always start with helping Christians understand what God's desire and plan are. Ishmael had, from Genesis 16 to 21, is about Hagar, and it is a wonderful story for Hagar, even though in the circumstances of what happened to her, God promises a couple things to Hagar. He names Ishmael in the womb. There's only 5 people in the Bible that get that honor. Jesus is among one of them. And so God has a plan for Ishmael. He names him.
There's 3 other people that were named in the womb.
Or is it 3 or 5?
I don't know. Well, I meant 3 other besides Ishmael and
Jesus.
And Jesus.
I don't know if
you said 3 more, 5 total, right?
Right. I want it. I don't know if it's.
Does that line up with the Quran?
No, it does not.
No, it does not. Okay.
So he promises to make him a great nation. He promises to be a donkey of a man. Which
Ishmael? What's that mean?
So a lot of people could think the context of that is he's going to be a wild beast. He's going to be an animal. That is not by any means. But the reality is, if you look at the Arab Peninsula, no one's ever conquered them. And that is a promise from God. No one would ever cause them to become an animal that is being constrained.
And
to
again,
be used
for
as
those of us that are geographically challenged, like
Saudi Arabia.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen. And the last thing is the wealth that Saudi Arabia has is a promise from the Old Testament God. He promised to bless
the
them.
Old Testament Bible God.
He promised to bless them as a nation. Back in the old time, gold was flaunted in the Arabian Peninsula. And if you look at today, oil is underneath them like a huge natural blessing from God.
They've got all the money in the world.
And then lastly,
I think Donald Trump just signed a $450 million.
I think it was billion dollar
Was it?
military aid to Saudi Arabia.
How about that? In Saudi Arabia, I'm going to get off track, but remind me to go back to Saudi Arabia because I want to ask you guys about Sharia law.
Yeah.
Because people want to know this. They want to understand. And from my understanding, Saudi Arabia practices Sharia law.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
They are the capital of Mecca, or Mecca is located in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And so Ishmael is named. He will have descendants that number the stars. He will be a blessing, or he will receive blessing from the Lord, and he will be a wild donkey of a man. Those are all wonderful blessings.
What was the donkey of a man thing again? What's that mean?
They were never conquered by any known empire. They've been the conquerors.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
Does that line up with the Quran, Yusuf?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And so.
What were you going to say? Go ahead.
No. I just say yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So and then if you look at Isaiah 40, when Ishmael has 12 descendants, 2 of them are named, tribes are named in the New Jerusalem in Isaiah 40. So God clearly has a desire for Ishmael's descendants to be in heaven.
Yeah.
So
take me back to the Bible study. Take me back to the Bible.
So as soon as he said Isaac, I corrected him on it, and he did a wonderful response. He's like, "This is what we believe. If you have a question about exactly what we believe, here's a Bible." And so that was the first Bible.
He didn't know who was handing that Bible to you.
Yeah, no.
Somebody was getting ready to memorize it.
And so I read it. But I had to first wrestle through, can I read this book? Is this book corrupted? And that was a really hard.
Would it corrupt you? I've wondered the same thing about the Quran. Just so you know, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And so I did the first thing I thought of. I took it to the mosque. I literally walked into the mosque and handed it to my imam.
Yeah.
And I have never experienced this until that day. I got hit by the imam in the face.
Punched you?
With the Bible. And then he threw it out the building.
Wow.
And said, don't ever bring this into this building again.
Wow. Now, Yusuf, do you think that would have happened, pardon us, but do you think that would have happened to you if you would have brought a Bible into the imam?
No,
And
I read the Bible.
You read the Bible too?
I read the Bible, but that doesn't mean I believe in it completely.
Yeah.
I think, me personally, I think part of the Bible is corrupted. I know that, but I still read the Bible.
Yeah.
I still read it.
Yeah. I mean, your perspective. But I just wondered, for people that are listening and trying to learn, this happened to Osman. So for him, this was a real live experience. So I'm saying, okay, Yusuf, I know your parents allowed you to choose. They allowed you to choose. Do you want to be Muslim? Do you want to be Christian? Figure it out for yourself. And I think you made that choice at about 14, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Osman raised very differently. No choice.
All Muslim.
All Muslim, and as a matter of fact.
So I was, and the Quran kind of reaffirms it, that you don't choose, that you are born Muslim. because the book of life was written before, like, all of existence. You're already born a Muslim. That's why every single Quranic verse or references Abraham is a Muslim. Moses is a Muslim. But Muhammad didn't get revelation until 600 AD. So they would be Jews.
That'll be interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Get a little closer so we can hear you.
One thing you need to know about being a Muslim. A Muslim, you need to know the definition of a Muslim.
One who submits.
One who submits.
To what?
To Almighty God.
Uh-oh.
So
So
anyone who submits.
Now, hold on.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ himself said.
So what do you call?
I submit my will to Almighty God.
So would you call?
Let him finish, Osman. Let him finish. So keep going. I want to hear what else he says.
Anybody who submits his will to Almighty God is called a Muslim.
Okay.
So that's why we say Abraham, Moses,
Yes.
Jesus.
They were Muslims because they submitted their will to God, even though their heritage was Jewish. Okay. But I mean, the Muslims, the Muslims would recognize their heritages of Jewish heritage.
We believe Jesus is a Muslim. We believe Noah is a Muslim.
Okay.
Abraham is a Muslim.
Okay. And does the Quran say that?
Yes, because they all submit their will to Almighty God.
Okay. So if I believe that I'm submitting my will to God, and I'm a professed Christian, would Muslims say, "Well, you're a Muslim"?
You're a Muslim as long as you submit your will to Almighty God.
Wow. Very interesting.
A Muslim is a person who submits his will to Almighty
I got it. Yeah. What were you going to say, Osman? Sorry.
I would say that I recognize that definition is accurate in some sense, but is submission a choice, or can it be forced upon someone?
It is a choice. Even in the Quran, it says you cannot force any human.
There's no compulsion.
There's no compulsion in
But
religion.
it also says it does imply in some places that you make them.
Thus, if you're in disagreement or someone tries to come and take your possession, then you stand on your own right and fight for your religion. And anybody who do that, that's what Donald Trump is doing now for America. He's fighting for his people.
I hear that. But
I want to hear. Wait a minute.
But then that goes into folk Islam a little bit, because what is the definition of what belongs to what? For instance, would you recognize that Jerusalem and Israel are the Jewish nation and it belongs to them, or would you recognize that when it became Muslim occupied and Muslim owned, it forever stayed that way?
It didn't forever stay that way. When this guy, when this guy took over, when Islam took over Jerusalem, they make it peaceful. They told people who will become neighbors, and they give them free will to practice their own religion.
So then, would you say then that the Palestinians that are
they give them free will, and that's all that matters as long as there's peace.
I would say that peace didn't exist when the Dome on the Rock destroyed the temple to build it.
I mean,
when the 7-Day War ended in Jerusalem and the Israelis got it back
when Yusuf smiles like that.
So in the 7-Day War, you had Egypt, Jordan, and Syria all attacking Jerusalem.
Okay. One at a time.
Jerusalem right now, and you see the scripture on the wall.
Yeah.
I've been to the Dome on the Rock. You know what the scripture say? About the Muslim, about the Christian, say we are brothers.
I get that.
And they lived, when Muslim was in power, they lived peacefully with the Christians and gave Christians the same right that the Muslims.
Okay. Let me stop you guys for 1 second, Yusuf Osman. So I'm going to let you continue that in a little bit. But before we get into, now you see, what's going on in our world. I mean, people have different convictions. Osman and I happen to share the same conviction. Yusuf and I would say I'm a Christian. Yusuf would say he's a Muslim. Yusuf would say I'm a Muslim. And so, but I love him like my son anyhow. And you're going to hear that story in a minute. So, Osman, finish up for me. So,
you
get hit by the imam.
Right. And so that was my first wake up call.
Because you're so smart. You're like, wait a minute. Why is he threatened?
Right. And
Would you say that's a bad imam?
So I had
That's a bad imam.
So I had an internal struggle. The Quran states that the Injil, the Torah, and the Quran are Allah's holy words. The Old Testament, the New Testimony, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are all holy scriptures. And then I had to wrestle with, so it says that no man can change Allah's word.
Mm-hmm.
I had to wrestle with that because the reality was, if no man can change his word, where did I get the thought process that the Gospels were changed? Who had the authority to change the will of Allah and His commandment that no one can change His word? And when did they do it? And how were they able to be more powerful than God? And I really had to wrestle with that.
Yeah.
So if His word cannot be changed,
Mm-hmm.
and there is historical proof that Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John are intact, no one's ever changed them, then they have to be His word.
But if I'm Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm Muslim, wouldn't I just say that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that's not the word of God?
How?
I
The
would just say
Quran calls them the word of God.
Oh, the Quran does. Yeah, go ahead. You should pull that over there.
In the Quran, it's the only the 3 books that were mentioned.
Yes.
It's called the Zaburi,
Matthew, Mark,
the Injil,
the Injil.
the Zaburi, and which is the Old Testament,
Mm-hmm.
and the Psalms,
Okay.
and the Quran.
Okay.
Those are the only books that God that was mentioned in the as holy books
Mm-hmm.
in the Quran. Those are the only books. I didn't think the Quran mentioned the Matthew book and Matthew.
The Injil. Mark, Matthew.
The Injil at that time was a book that was given to Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ had on his own.
And
so we believe as a Muslim, when Jesus went, he took the book with him.
Where does it say that in the Quran?
I mean, it didn't say, but that's what we believe, and that's why God said, with time, people that came up with the Injil and the other books, they corrupted it. They put their own words in. They fabricated it.
How could they do that?
Because
it would
it's
go
a
against
book.
it goes against the will of Allah. What you're saying
but
is literally would consider shirk. You just committed it. You said that a man could change or write something
it was talking
against
about
the will of Allah.
But he was talking about the books before then. That the book got corrupted, and that's why he revealed the Holy Quran.
And I understand that. I
to
understand you
Prophet
believe
Muhammad,
that. I understand.
which can never, and he said, and God
But
also
Muhammad
said,
references
the
book.
Quran will never be changed.
Right, but Muhammad goes, if you have any doubts or have any questions, go to the people of the book. He literally references
Yeah, he said, go to
600
people-
years later,
Yeah,
which we can prove that the Christians of that time were reading the same book that we have today.
But it later got corrupted. That's what
Muhammad.
he said.
It would have to be after Muhammad, because between Muhammad and Jesus is 600 years.
I don't know.
And we have that books.
I don't know.
In between that.
We'll know maybe Judgment Day or someone will meet God.
But that's the thing you have to
Well,
admit.
one
You're
will meet
saying
God.
that in that time, when that means that someone corrupted Allah's word and wrote something different. And that would also imply
Because
that
if you
Muhammad's word, which is during the same time, can also be corrupted.
The Quran, that's why I say God also said the Quran cannot. That's why He
The
revealed the
Quran
Quran.
cannot be corrupted.
That's why He brought the Quran. He revealed the Quran. The Quran cannot be corrupted, and Muhammad will be the last messenger.
As a seal
And He
of the
said
prophets.
anybody that have doubt with the Quran,
Go to the book.
they should bring any
So
reference
this argument,
or any book
Yeah.
Yusuf.
that would defile it.
So this argument is an awesome one. I'd love to hear you talk more, but I want to do two things. So I want to understand the rest of your story,
Right.
and then I want to get to your story. And then if you guys want to keep talking, we'll play as long as people want to listen. So
Okay.
so finish your story. You're conflicted.
Right. So at that point, I had to wrestle with, okay, if the New Old Testament is divided into two parts, they have the Old Testament as the Old Testament and the Psalms, but the Psalms is in the middle. So the Old Testament goes around it. So if you take the Old Testament, and the Psalms are all grouped together. We call that the Old Testament. And so I decided that after that incident with what happened at the imam, I could not trust his judgment because the violence was the immediate response to me asking a simple question that I've never seen violence before. Mm-hmm. There was something dangerous about the book.
Did you talk to your parents about it?
I didn't want to because if
you
you
were
reacted
afraid.
like that, my parents would whoop me. Like Somalis believe in physical discipline.
Like you actually having you actually having the Bible, was that dangerous?
Yeah.
Like so your parents would have been like,
so then I had to then go, okay, if I had to wrestle with, if this is Allah's word and it's preserved, I'm going to read the Old Testament. Just read that. There's not a single Islamic reference says the Old Testament and the Psalms are corrupted. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read those. And so I did. But the thing that happened is these stories that as a child that I had memorized are not full extent of the story as compared to the Old Testament. In Islam, we get snippets. You get shortened, narrowed in viewpoints of the scripture that doesn't give you the full story. And so as I'm reading this, I'm reading it for the full amount. And another beautiful thing about the Old Testament was it's in chronological order, mm-hmm. where the Quran isn't in chronological order. Mm-hmm. You have the Meccan Quran, and then you have the Medina verses, and they're not separated. They're all together. It goes from the largest books to the smallest books. And so reading the Old Testament, it was a history, a timeline, and then I could see what God was doing as a one narrative story. Mm-hmm. So then I started reading about...
So when did that... So you just said a really powerful statement. You could see what God was doing.
Right.
That's a pretty...
Because he's... So this is the mindset that I really had to fight.
And you had this mindset at 14.
Right. And so it's the Bible isn't many writers telling many stories. Mm-hmm. It's God, one writer, telling his story through many people.
Isn't the Quran one story written by one person?
One person, but it's about multiple people. And it's from Muhammad, from the angel to Muhammad to the writer to the book. So
you got to slow down for us under 3-digit IQs.
So the first and only miracle of Muhammad, because when he was challenged, show us a sign that you're a prophet. Mm-hmm. Isaiah called fire from the sky. Moses parted the sea. Jesus brought people back from the dead. Show me your message. Your
Who was challenging him?
The 7th century Arabs that were pagan at the time. Muhammad's response was, "I'm an illiterate man who wrote a book," and that was it. He never.
Then what? So why did he get such a following?
Conquest, conquering cities and giving wealth to his believers.
What made him
his selling point?
What made him be able to go conquest?
Food.
Yeah, but what about him?
So he was a nice person that everyone loved.
But he had to get it by the sword.
So he was a person of influence.
No, not really. Not by the sword. Islam was never spread by the sword. Islam was spread by the generosity of the people.
Hold on.
The people were nice, and when they travel all over, people were like, "Oh, we liked it. We like your behavior. We like the way you treat people." And
really?
So Muhammad never fought a single battle, Islam. But yet from the Medina verses, he's very peaceful. I will never deny that. Well, I will never dishonor that. But when you go to the Meccan verses,
I'll ask you when you finish.
When he went to Muhammad in 7th century in Mecca got kicked out because the pagans didn't want to accept his message. He moved to Medina.
Pagans.
Right, and then so he moved from Mecca to Medina. In Medina, he grew in influence. He grew in following. He grew through the message. In some parts, were peaceful.
Yeah.
But the last 10 years of his life, he fought a battle every 20 days.
That was when That was when God actually gave him the permission to
kill.
Because one thing, if someone come to your house and get rid of you. Mm-hmm. And get rid of you, and you're powerless at the time. And you would say you go like, I just put in a different perspective.
Yeah.
And you go out, you practice, you try and train, and you want to come back and reclaim your place that belongs to you rightfully. And God tell you to go back and go get your place where they drive you from. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you do the same thing?
If God told me to do it, I would hope I'm going to do it.
That's the same, yeah. God, I go back to where they drove you from, that rightly belong to you, and get rid of them. But if if they surrender, do not harm them, leave them, and you people should live peacefully.
And I hear that. But the question is,
that was it.
But the question is, these Arabs have been living there for centuries, and he comes to their also home. Are they not going to defend?
But
it?
not all of them were in that particular city. When
Mecca
they came,
Mecca became a bloodshed.
when Muhammad was actually there, people, the immigrant that came because of that used to travel to come worship the idol worship there. They were the one that got rid of him and took over the land, and they started living there.
So
it was not even. It didn't belong to them, so they were immigrant anyway.
And I would argue that might be rightfully so, but even so those pagans did a lot of what they did is adopted into Muslim beliefs and Muslim culture. Those 7th century pagans that were wiped out or rightfully removed, as you would say, because this wasn't their home. They washed their bodies before they worshipped. In the same manner, they washed their feet 3 times. They washed their hands 3 times. They washed behind their ears and behind over their forehead, or back and forth. Where does that come from?
No, I don't know.
In Islam, it's adopted.
I don't
answer
know
this: Why?
We're clean.
Okay, how about this? Answer this: those pagans, what did they believe in? 1, because that might surprise you. 2, what was the symbol of their faith?
So
and what is the symbol of Islam? Answer that.
You want to say the crest?
Why is the crescent moon a symbol of Islam?
I mean, we
Show
don't.
me the Quranic verse.
You will never meet a Muslim that actually like symbol like
worships the symbol.
worship the symbol.
But why?
We don't.
Symbols have meanings.
We don't even we don't use it. Like no Muslim.
What is the meaning of it? Where did it come from?
Look at every Eid.
We never use it.
When you have Eid,
what's it for?
Saudi Arabia,
that's on television. Go to people's house. You will never see. You will never see it.
I will show you pictures in London when they do.
Okay. I'm going to stop you both.
But I'll continue. The crescent moon is adopted from 7th century pagans in the moon goddess Allah, and it is now part of
we
Islam.
don't even have it. We consider it like idol worship.
But it's a symbol of Islam
anything
for the
symbol
world.
is idol. That's why we don't even put anything.
Yeah.
But it's a symbol of Islam.
Have you seen any Muslim that have it on the?
Okay, let me. Yusuf and Osman, hold on.
Yeah.
This is important to me. Please stop arguing. Actually, I like you can argue all you want, but let me ask a question. Why is it important to recognize that the crescent moon in your mind is a symbol of Islam, Osman?
Because if you type it in,
why does it matter?
Because context is king. So in this context, why is the crescent moon with a single star?
I don't know why.
No, but I'm saying this is.
I want to understand.
This is something that every single Muslim has to wrestle. Every imagery, every single choice in Islam is intentional. And to say that it's not is saying that it goes against the will of Allah, because He ordained, He controls, and He continually protects and preserves.
So we're gonna.
Okay, where in the Quran it actually say the crest is a symbol of peace?
It's not.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of what. Okay.
Explain to me. I follow the Quran. I don't follow what other Muslims do.
So that's a good.
That's
a good starting point.
That's one thing.
Hold on. How do you enter?
I'll speak about myself.
I'm glad we got here, because now you're going to see how much you idol worship. Everything that you do does not come from the Quran. How do you enter a building? How do you eat food with your
Shalom
hand?
alaikum.
How do you eat food? With what hand?
How do you cut your beard?
Hand. How do you cut your beard? What length does it go?
It doesn't mean like
everything that you do comes from the hadiths, because Muhammad did it.
It's just if you go to every religion have the same thing. Even the cross. The cross was not even there before Jesus. The cross has been there.
I understand.
Years
but
before.
The wrestling point is everything
I'm just saying.
You eat, how you enter
at one point, every religion adopted something.
Yeah, yours
into
is
their
adopted.
own stuff.
So here's my question, Yusuf, hold on. Yeah. So keep in mind that we're doing this for the benefit of other people. So you guys have a friendship, and you can keep going.
Course.
So
I love you.
Yeah.
But so the reality is,
which is timeout. Yeah. Timeout. You're too smart for your own good. That's a pretty cool thing. Christian, former Muslim, Muslim, current Muslim. He looks at him and says, "I love him." That's a big deal. That's where we need to be. Yeah. Keep going on your story.
So I had to wrestle with a lot. The
biggest
things that I had to wrestle with is how I practice Islam is not from the Quran. It's a lot to do, and I'm going to be honest, with my idol worship of one man.
This is where you work, because you're continuing your story. Because your passion is evangelism.
Yep.
I want you to tell your story.
The biggest struggle was to even become a Muslim. I had to do something I never realized. I equated equality with God through one man. To become a Muslim, you have to say the Shahada, but the Shahada ends with not God, but with a man.
That he's the messenger.
But it doesn't say Isa. It doesn't say Moses. It doesn't say David.
You're going back to your argument.
So
keep going and stay on your story.
The whole entrance to become a Muslim, you have to admit two absolute truths. You have to admit that there should be only one God, and you have to accept the second part, that Muhammad is his prophet. If you can say the first part, but you are not a Muslim. You are not someone who submits. To submit, you have to recognize Muhammad as a prophet.
Is that true?
And once you do that, you have to cut your hair like him. You have to name your firstborn child after him. You have to. Yes, you do.
No.
Okay.
Wait! You're getting back into arguing. Stop, Yusuf.
Show me a place in the Quran
Yusuf.
that says that.
Yusuf.
That's what I'm saying.
Osman.
He made a valid point. He said, "Show me where it says in the Quran."
In the Quran.
But the reality is, 99% of Muslims do not live by the Quran.
Don't compare
they
what
live
people
by the hadith.
do.
Okay, so hold on.
For instance, his belief,
even the hadith is not even
his
there.
belief.
Hey, I want you guys to know.
Yeah.
I've lost control of this podcast.
It's okay.
Hey, Ken, shut off their mics and bring down the electrical one.
So everything that Muslims normally attribute to Muhammad's peace, his generosity, everything that they talk about him is not in the Quran. So all of those don't count. They should not be true, and they should not be accepted as true.
So
everything you speak about Muhammad is not in the Quran. Speak to me what it says in the Quran about him.
So you guys, like I said earlier, Yusuf, you guys are buddies, and you can continue that. I want you to continue your story without doing this.
I had to wrestle with that because the reality was, like I said, I admitted I worshipped Muhammad as equal as God.
Mm-hmm.
No Muslim will ever confess that. It is.
This is his story.
But I would argue how I cut my hair.
You can tell yours in a minute.
So in the Quran.
How do we know how Muhammad cut his hair? It's in the Quran?
It's not in the Quran. It's in the Hadith. The Hadiths are the rules that Sharia law is built on.
Yusuf, let me ask you a question. Before we keep going, hold on. Yusuf, is the Hadith as important or as valid as the Quran?
The Hadith is
yes or no?
Important, but
I just want to know that because I have no idea.
Is the Quran. If you're a true Muslim, you follow what the Quran says.
What about the Hadith? Because I've never heard that word till today.
The Hadith is kind of like a tradition. It's a tradition.
Is it just as important?
Not as important. The Quran is what all
to you,
Muslims,
it's not as important.
All Muslim people should follow.
Where does Sharia law come from? The Quran?
Every country have their own Sharia law.
Right, but
every country have their own rule. That's why
it's
a cultural stuff.
I get that, and I recognize that. So I want you to say it right now.
If you're a Muslim, you have to follow the Quran.
Right. So
forget about what other people do.
So
they can say they're Muslim.
Right.
They don't even know what's in the Quran.
So if you're a Muslim, Yusuf, and I know how quick your mind works, I follow you. So if you're a Muslim, do I have to follow the Hadith?
You follow the Quran.
Or okay, so wait a minute. I'm asking a question. If I'm a Muslim, do I have to follow the Hadith, or is that just custom? That's
you follow it. You follow it because it's kind of it's a custom, but
by definition, do I have to follow the Hadith in order to be?
You don't have to follow the Hadith. To be a Muslim, you have to follow the Quran. That's what we believe.
I got it.
And I'm
the Quran because it's the word of God.
Yes.
Okay. So since we've established that, now I have permission. Anytime you reference something that has to do with the Hadith, I can tell you that's not from the Quran.
Osman likes to win arguments.
You gave me the freedom to call it out.
That's what I'm saying. I say it's a tradition, it's a custom.
Right.
That's what I'm saying about the Hadith. It's a custom.
You both said the same thing, I think.
So we have established now the Hadiths are not scriptural. They're not from Allah. They should not be counted.
It's a custom. It's like it's followers.
Which is fine. I'm totally fine with customs. But when we're talking about religion, it means now your customs has to leave
Let
the
me
room.
let me ask
And
you guys
only
this
the
question,
Quran.
because this is something
Because
people.
I had to do that. I had to wrestle with: is my culture telling me what to believe, and am I believing my culture or am I believing God?
Yeah.
I had to wrestle with that.
Yeah.
And so now that
Which is a blessing that God allows you to
now
see
that
that.
we've removed culture, so that the hadith is gone, the idol worship of Muhammad's gone. What does his exact words say? And that's it.
Your
And
story. This is
and
where
so
you
that's
are.
where I got to the New Testimony. If this is the truth of Allah, that it should not be different word for word in the Quran. But then I ran into a problem. There is a different word for word.
You're still 14 when you're doing this, or
Right.
this is
And
between
so-
14 and 17?
Yeah, between 14, right. So this happened between 14 and 17 while I was searching. So
Yeah.
I wanted to know.
Yep.
If
3 years of work.
I had to remove my bias, my filter of Somali heritage, and just know God for me. Because at the end of the day, my culture is not going to get me into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be before God for judgment. I will. And if that is the final result, I'm alone in this. I need to remove all.
So
this.
at that point, you make a decision that
to be neutral and to be factual, meaning I only looked at what the Quran said, and I only looked at what the Torah, the Psalms, and the Injil said.
yeah. So you actually
and
went through.
leave culture out of it.
You actually went through the Bible, Osman, and you marked highlighted every single place
thing that did not fit
with the
what I
Quran.
was taught.
Yeah.
And did not fit with the Quran.
Got
and
it.
I had to wrestle
You read it
with
front
this.
to back.
If I leave the Injil out and the Old Testament and the Psalms are not changed and not corrupted, because no imam ever taught that, then they should line up exactly with the Quran. But they don't. Stories don't line up. The numbers don't line up. The Noah had 80 people on the boat in the Quran. In the Torah,
There's plenty.
8.
Yeah, yeah. It
So it's
didn't make sense to you.
hold
They
on,
didn't
that
line up.
math
So
doesn't
yeah,
line
yeah,
up.
yeah.
If Allah invented mathematics, there would not be a mistake like this. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so that's why I had to acknowledge there might be things.
So when
in
did
the
you make
Quran
the
that's
jump?
not wrong. And then ultimately, I wanted to know, what is the oldest Quran in the world? $2.5 billion or $2.5 million was spent on one Quran. It's 1200th century when it's dated. 600 years after Muhammad is the oldest Quran, worth $2.5 million.
Wow.
So that, to me, makes a 600-year difference between that. So then I had to accept in my mind, if I believe that the Quran or the Bible was corrupted from 33 AD to Muhammad's time in 633, something happened, it was changed. The same could be true for the Quran that we have today, and I had to treat them equal. Then I thought, and I still presume, if God is holy, both of these wouldn't be changed. As a Muslim, I had to acknowledge that because
You're still
nothing is-
Muslim at this point.
Right, nothing is more powerful than Allah. No man can change His word. So I had to accept the Bibles being accurate, and I had to accept the Quran being accurate. But then there was something that made them different. Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate middle point between these two. Christians believe in Jesus, and the Quran teaches about Jesus. If those don't line up, then there's a problem. In Isaiah 44:6, God. So Christians believe that Jesus and God are one. Islam, they didn't teach that. I don't understand why they would teach that. And I try to understand, how can Jesus be both man and God? And I looked at the Quran, and it doesn't make sense. But then there's something that the Quran says, the Old Testament says, and Jesus says, and something didn't add up. In the Quran, it states that Allah is the beginning and the end. Apart from Him, there is no other God. He says He's the first and He's the last. In the Old Testament, Isaiah 44:6, God says to Israel, "I am your King and Redeemer. I am the first and I am the last." And then in Revelation, I'm going to have you read this part, Revelation 1:17 and 18, if you want to pull it up on your phone. Read what Jesus says from His own mouth. He's never committed a sin. He's never lied. He's the holiest prophet by far, because He was born by the will of Allah. He had virgin birth. He spoke at 2 days old. He brought back a bird from clay to life. He brought a dead man back to life. He is saying these words, and there's a problem. So I'll let you read it. Revelation 1:17 and 18. And this is Jesus speaking. It's in red letters.
Osman is now running this podcast.
Yeah.
He said, "Yep." Revelations 1 what?
17 and 18.
When I saw Him, I fell at His feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades."
So Jesus is talking to John, and he says to John, "I am the first and I'm the last." That's a big statement. He's claiming the same thing that the Old Testament God claimed, the same thing Allah claims in the Quran. And Jesus says in that sentence, "I am the first and the last." And then he even goes further and says, "I was once dead and I'm alive." And he now holds judgment and death in his hands. And that was an issue. So then I had to ask the question, when did Jesus die in the Quran? And in Surah 19, verse 33, Jesus is talking to Allah.
Is Surah one of the books in Quran?
Which means chapter.
This means chapter.
Oh, sorry.
So Jesus says, "Blessed was the day I was born, blessed be the day I die, and blessed be the day to be raised to life again." So Jesus is talking about his birth, death, and resurrection as a blessing.
In the Quran.
In the context of the Quran, and a lot of Muslims will argue, but that's at the end of judgment, that's when Jesus will come back and he'll die again. And then I tell them, that is not what Jesus and Allah are talking about at all. Judgment is not even listed in that chapter. If Jesus said from his mouth, his birth is a blessing, his death is a blessing, and his resurrection is a blessing, how is his birth a blessing? In the New Testimony, it says that when Jesus came, he came to be the fulfillment, or John said, "Behold the Lamb of God." Jesus literally is that innocent sufferer that comes to take blessing away, or curse away from us. How is his death how is his death a blessing? In his death, our sins died with him. That is a blessing. And then his resurrection. If he can come back from the dead, which he said he was going to die, and he will come back, and he fulfills that, he has power and dominion over death. So that's a blessing. But in the Quran, that makes no sense, those three statements. And also for him to claim that he is the first and the last.
So for you at this point, you realize all this, light goes on, and
so the end result is,
what happens with you?
Oh, for me. So
yes.
Then I started reading Scripture. So Scripture, in a sense, I started seeing that one narrative. In Adam, I saw...
Started in Genesis?
Yep,
started at the beginning?
Started in the beginning. The fall of man. So in Adam...
So you processed all. Right. You processed all that. And what happens for Osman?
I came to realization, at the end of my Muslim life, who's going to judge me? It's not Allah. It's Jesus. Jesus will be the person to judge the difference in his.
And you came to that.
Right.
This is key. You came to that understanding.
Jesus
let me finish.
Back to judge the world.
Let me finish. Okay. You came to that understanding by studying the Quran and by studying the Bible.
Right.
Okay. Now
for
we're good.
Me, I started in the Quran, and that led me to come to the realization if Jesus is going to be ultimately judging my life,
yes,
and he's going to be the arbitrator for judging the whole world,
yeah,
what did he teach?
Yes.
And he clearly taught if you want to go to the Father, you have to go through him.
Only way.
And
that's what the Bible says.
Only way. And in Islam it says that we are striving to stay on the path. And if Jesus said that the road to hell is broad and wide and many walk through it,
yes,
but the narrow path to salvation,
yep,
few walk it.
So you're processing this as a 17-year-old kid, and then what happens to Osman?
And then there's a response. If so, as it says in Hebrew, through the mouth you confess and you are saved. So my confession was baptism. Why? Because baptism was a spiritual death.
So you decided at that point.
That is right. I will be baptized because baptism is literally you dying spiritually for the last time ever. So the phrase is born once, die twice. Born twice, die once. And the context is if you are born once into this world but never baptized, in the sense of born again, then you will die a physical death and then you have a spiritual death. So you'll die 2 times. And you will be judged and you will go to, And if you're born twice, you die once. And that context comes from Nicodemus coming to Jesus. And Nicodemus says, how must I get into the kingdom of heaven?
Yeah.
And Jesus looks at him and says, you must be born again. And Nicodemus, just like any one of us today, goes, how can a man go into his mother and come out again and be born again?
Right.
And then he says, that is the context of what baptism is.
Yeah.
You are dying, and a new person is coming.
Yeah. So at that point, you give your life to Christ.
August 26, 2007.
Wow. Amazing story. We're going to have you back on because I want to learn more about what you're doing now. No, it's awesome. I try to follow his brain. It goes too fast for me, Yusuf. So, Yusuf, no, it was good. And I love the back and forth. So tell the audience how you ended up here. You're in Nigeria. You're living in Lagos, right? 21 million people?
Yeah, at the time, 21 million. Now, 21
It's more.
million people.
More,
It's
yeah.
more than 21?
Yeah.
Wow. I had 75,000.
Yeah.
75,000 in the whole city?
Yeah.
Oh,
In
Mankato. I was thinking,
Mogadishu.
yeah.
Mogadishu's way bigger.
Yeah, I thought.
Muslims know how to make babies.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Yeah, when I came here when I was like 15, just like every other African. They try to like create a future for themselves. Because the country I came from, Nigeria, is like we say a country of no hope, where like the youth have no future. So only the older people that are in the government that have power, they control everything.
Because it's so corrupt.
Yeah, because it's so corrupt. So
Yeah.
the youth are just dying. So they have no life, no future, nothing. And everything, what you see on TV every time during election time, the youth are the future, the youth are the future. But it's
Not the
it's
case.
no, not the case.
Basically, it's rigged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very rigged. So I came to the United States
To play
change-
basketball.
To change my future actually, and because I came from a very, very poor family. My dad was poor, my mom was poor. They were both traders, and we were 8 in our family. And at the time, I didn't want to come actually, but my dad thought it was the best option for me. That if I come here, that I will be able to help myself and help the family too, and help my brothers and sisters in some type of way. So I came here to further my education first and play basketball also. So it was a golden opportunity for me because
it's every kid's dream.
Yeah, it's
It's
every
like you're
kid's-
going to America. Your
Yeah.
dad loved you enough. Of course, he wanted you with him. He said, Yusuf, go. You can help us.
it was
Real
every kid's
love.
dream, even up to today. And if you go to Nigeria, ask every kid out of 1,000 kids you ask that would you like to leave your country right now to come to America,
They're gone.
99.9 will say yes.
They're leaving.
They're living
because there's no hope
with no hope.
for most of the kids, at least where you were living. Very few privileged, right?
Yeah, very few. Very few.
So you get here and you land in.
I was in Chicago.
You leave
for
8. There's 8 of you total, right?
Yeah.
And your dad was actually a Magard.
Yeah, it was a Mega. It was a gate, which is translated gate man.
Uh huh.
So
For a
it was-
church.
It was a security.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah,
Yusuf, you were born in a
for
church.
Yeah, he got
It's
it
a
in
sign from
church,
God.
and I was,
Yes, not in a mosque,
I was born in the church also.
not in a mosque, in a church,
Yeah, in a church.
of which your dad was a Magard. And they gave you a small little room there, and you used to sleep outside. Is that right?
Yes, which I did.
Hmm.
So growing up, I couldn't fit in the house, so I started sleeping outside.
He is 6'10".
Yeah.
I believe he ran a 4:10 mile.
Yeah, he
So
was.
I started sleeping outside. So within a few years, my uncle who played basketball, Rodney,
Mm-hmm.
so he came back from England and he saw me. He's like, dude, you have to play basketball. And blah, blah. So he introduced me to basketball. And within a year or two, I got like scholarship to come to the United States. And I
You
came
land
to
where in the
US,
United States? You
In Utah.
okay?
Mormon country.
Yeah, Mount Pleasant, Utah.
Mm-hmm. And you actually moved in with 2 Mormons there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were my host family actually. Elizabeth and Pete, great people,
Mm.
amazing people. They took care of me just like their own.
Mm.
My all 3 years there, and we did wonderful there. We helped the school to accomplish great things.
Won 3 state titles,
State
right?
Championship,
Yeah. Met your
And
your
we-
best friend and brother and Alex.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Alex and Insa and other people. So it was great. So after I finished there, and I came to Cincinnati to continue my basketball at Cincinnati State. So after a year, I got injured. My basketball career ended.
Do you want to talk about that at all? Pretty amazing story.
Yeah, after
And
the
again,
first year, I
you
was-
keep in mind, who are you talking to? You know, it's really not about you.
Yeah, after my first year, like when I was in Cincinnati State, I was very, very eager to be on the court because I wanted to prove a lot of people wrong.
Mm-hmm.
People that were like doubted my skills and
Mhm.
my ability as a basketball player. So unfortunately, I was diagnosed with aortic root in my heart,
You know, Marfan syndrome.
Marfan syndrome.
Yeah.
So
You had a
before
aneurysm.
aneurysm in my heart, like a hole in my heart. I've had this for a long time, so I didn't know. So like playing basketball all these years, I've added like a lot of pressure into it, and I didn't catch it in time. And the surgeon was saying, like, you could have died on the court, like you were this close. You were this close of just like running on the court and just die. And I remember sometimes I'll come to the house, I'll just be like exhausted. I can sleep for like 15 hours.
Well, and they thought you had asthma.
Yeah,
Because you were having trouble. He's having trouble breathing this whole time in Utah.
Right.
And the Marfans was found by the eye doctor.
Yeah.
Suzanne took you to the eye doctor, and he said, hey, you got a
Yeah.
disconnected lens. You're 6'10". Get checked for Marfans.
Yeah, so
So you're diagnosed. You go meet the surgeon, Lars Svensson.
yeah,
Only guy in the world with any statistics. Think about this, Osman. So here's this little kid from Nigeria, dreamed to come to America, shows up, and ends up in Cincinnati, Ohio. First time we got Yusuf, he was 17. Prince, your good friend from back home, came to me and said, hey, I have a couple of guys that are not in great situations. Can you help them? We bring him into our home. Suzanne takes him to the eye doctor, gets diagnosed. We find out there's one surgeon in the whole world, that can actually do this surgery without actually having to put an implant in. And because Yusuf was too old at the time for us to adopt him and make sure that he could stay here, we would have done that. But if you're older than 15, it doesn't make any difference. So the surgeon knew that the surgeon down at Christ Hospital said he could have to go back to Africa. And if he has to go back to Africa, he needs to be on Coumadin where he doesn't have access to those things. So he said there's one surgeon in the whole world that can do this surgery, happens to be in Ohio. Lars Svensson, right? He had done many NBA players, several NBA players, all the big-time athletes. And then you find out when you're there for the surgery, and I don't know if you know this or not, but you had 1 in 100 chance of dying in the surgery.
Yeah.
And in that morning, it was Yusuf and I was there. Doctor came in and said, Yusuf, on a scale, the nurse maybe, on a scale 1 to 10, where's your fear level? Tell him what you said.
I said 0.
You said 0. I'm not afraid. And
it was like, you're the first person that actually told me this all my life.
Yeah,
Since
yeah.
I've been doing this.
So we have the surgery, and after the surgery, and I don't know if you realize this, but when I tell this story, Yusuf, and I want to hear more from you, but I think there was a bit of distrust. Like, you're thinking, what's going on? What are these people doing? He didn't really know us. This is 6 years ago. He's thinking, I'm fine. I might have asthma. He was playing basketball. And then I think, when I tell this story, I think that changed. And you tell me if I'm right or not. When you found out, about 3 or 4 days after the surgery, who else had the exact same surgery by same doctor there?
It was a player from Nigeria who was kind of like an idol. Every young player I used to look up to.
Kanu, right?
His name was Kanu, yeah.
And he was kind of like the Nigerian Pele.
Yeah, so he had the same surgeon that I had.
So here's this kid in Nigeria coming from nothing, ends up in Cleveland, Ohio with a national hero as the same surgery. And at that point, I felt like you realized you were in good hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you
survived it.
You recovered from the surgery. You did amazing. You go on to Tusculum College.
Yeah, I went to Tusculum College. And
Talk about your experience there.
It was great. I thought I was going to play basketball again, but it didn't work out. But the coach kept me around. He wanted me to be like a player manager.
Didn't work out because of your physical issues.
Yeah, my physical issues. So he turned me into like a player manager.
Yeah.
So
You were a part
to
of the
still-
team.
To still be part of the team to help out in practice and
Mhm.
stuff. So I did that for 3 years and graduated
With like a 3.8,
with 3.7 GPA.
3.7. Let me tell that story. 3.8's better.
Yeah, so, and now I'm here, and just we thank God. And,
And Yusuf, you're in the middle of another fight.
yes, I am.
You're in the middle of another fight. So you were working with a friend of mine, Roger McClendon, up in Louisville, and you started having stomach problems in, what do you think it was, October? Because you would,
In October, yeah.
yeah, you would call home and you would, you started with, you were like, you had pain in the stomach, and you start trying to look, and then in January of this year,
Yes.
right, you're diagnosed with appendiceal cancer.
Yeah.
And so you go through, take us February 26, at about 5 in the morning, you start a surgery, and you go through 26 hours of surgery. Obviously, you can't do 26 hours in one day, but 15 hours straight on the 26th. They kept you in a coma on the 27th because they had to go back in on the 28th to do 11 more hours of surgery. To get as much of the cancer, and I think the doctor said he got maybe 95% of it out, is what he told us. He spent how many weeks in ICU? Do you remember?
Like 2-3 weeks.
I think it was 3 weeks at least, yep. And then maybe a 10-week stay in the hospital. And now you're in the process of fighting hard, yeah?
Yeah.
So, amazing story, really. Amazing story. What would you want to say, Yusuf, to a kid that's 13, 14 years old in Lagos that's trying to get to America? What would you say to him?
I'll just tell them not to believe on the hype, because a lot of people back home, they always think that when you come to America, like, you're blessed, like things are just going to be given to you.
Mm.
They don't know the outcome and what you have to go through to achieve those things. Like, even life in America is even twice harder than the life in Nigeria.
Now, do you say that because of the physical things you've been through, or just tell me what you think?
Just leaving your country, coming to a different country by yourself, with no family.
Yes.
That's like a struggle, number one.
Yes.
And you have to become a man. You have to decide by your own. Every decision you make will count on you, so which is tough. And you have to work twice harder or 3 times harder than you worked back home.
Really?
Because back home you don't have, there's no pressure on you to
Achieve.
to achieve.
But there's a pressure.
But here there is pressure on you to achieve. You have to accomplish things. You have to be successful. Because if you're not, people will see it as a failure when you go back home.
Wow. So does the pressure come from American society, or does it come from the people in Nigeria that are expecting you to do all these things to help them?
It comes from the people from back home in Nigeria.
Because they're thinking, hey, you're here.
Yeah, you
Help
have to
us.
help us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole pressure is on you.
Yeah.
So you have to help this person. You have to help that person.
Oh. And then I know,
So-
yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing amount of pressure for a 14-year-old kid to have on his shoulders, let alone the things that you've been through. So you would tell them, don't believe the hype.
Yeah, don't believe that hype. Just come here and do what you have to do. Be yourself. Just set up a goal. Achieve it. Go to school. Get your degree.
Mm-hmm.
And just be
And you got your
smart.
degree in 4 years.
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get in trouble. A lot of people, when they come here, they get in trouble. They get carried away with the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
What they see other people do.
Do you see a lot of your friends? Because you know he knows about every college basketball player that is on the court. We'll sit watching the NCAA tournament, and that's my friend, that's my friend, that's my friend. So do you see a lot of those kids getting in trouble?
Yeah, a lot of them get in trouble. They get carried away. They go to clubs. They do drugs and all those stuff.
Yeah. It'd be tough to handle, though.
Yeah.
You know, when you're coming from the culture that you were in, and then you're exposed to all this. That'd be a hard change.
Yes.
So Yusuf, can you talk a little Pidgin for me? How far? What's Pidgin? Pidgin
is like a local Nigerian dialect.
It's not a bird.
Yeah.
It's not a bird.
No. It's kind of like patois, Jamaican English.
Is the word for pigeon?
We call it broken
Pigeon.
English.
Huh?
It's called broken English.
No. What do you call the animal that we call a pigeon?
Oh, pigeon. I don't know.
You don't have a word for it?
You know that look right there? You know what that look was? That's a dumb question,
we
Osman.
call it pigeon too, but like.
Okay,
it's
I'm just
pigeon,
checking.
But it's spelled differently. Pidgin.
Okay.
Hey, how far?
A day.
A day. How you work
What does
today?
alpha mean?
Alpha means like how are you? Like hi.
Okay. Not in America.
How you work today?
Fine.
Fine.
Just
Fine.
there.
How you side?
My side there. We thank God.
Oh, I learned a little bit of Pidgin. That's about the beginning and the end of it. So, Yusuf, you would say to that, I mean, you said two different things. This is interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, did you catch that, Osman? I mean, he said there's no hope in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
But you would say to kids that want to come here, don't think it's just Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even though you've had people, I know you feel like, and we feel like you're our son, you're a part of our family. And you had amazing people in Utah that came alongside of you. You had some bad people. Yeah? I mean, there was a bad spot you got into in Mississippi. But you would still say to those kids, make sure you're ready to come because you got to grow up fast.
Yeah, you have to grow up fast.
Faster than
You think.
faster than you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. How many kids did you know when you came over here that came with you out of Nigeria?
I know a lot of us. There were a lot.
Yeah.
Like probably like 30, something like that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Are they all for athletic?
Yeah,
That's
it's all
cool.
for basketball.
And where are they now?
Some of them are playing professional right now.
Wow.
And some of them are seniors in school.
Mm-hmm. Yusuf, what do you want to say to your mom and brothers and sisters back home?
And I love them. I miss them.
Oh.
And I can't wait to see them. Yeah.
Love it. So, guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here today, sharing a little bit of your story. The hope is that it'll provide some inspiration and courage to people. Osman, your knowledge, and Yusuf, your knowledge and conviction is amazing. Yeah. And, proud of both of you. It's an amazing story. What an amazing God we serve that's writing an incredible story in our lives. So thanks for sharing. And the hope and prayer is that it touches other people that'll be in the same boat. So great job, you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.